Welcome to the Millionaire University Podcast. I'm your host, Brien Gearin, back in the saddle with you today. And on this edition of the MU Pod, I'm joined by Michael Levitt. He is the CEO of Breakfast Leadership Network, and he specializes in fighting burnout via media, therapy, books, and executive coaching. Michael, welcome to the show. I'm going to give you a minute for a better origin story than that, but I'm excited to have you here today.
Great to be with you, Brian. Really looking forward to our chat today.
Yeah, this is a pleasure. I think the message that you're going to share with our listeners today is very pertinent, especially as we're heading into the new year here. As we record this thing, I think there's going to be some great messaging that everyone's going to want to consider as we're all excited and kind of hitting the runway for coming out in 2025 strong. So, but before we do that, we're going to be our topic today is more importantly going to be about managing yourself, managing your time, and how to leverage it. And by doing it right, you can avoid stress and avoid burnout that so many entrepreneurs find themselves in time and again. So again, that's why I'm super excited today. But before we jump into that, I want to hear a little bit about your origin story. How did you find yourself where you are today?
Yeah, a series of unfortunate events. I never set out to be a keynote speaker, podcast host, writer, maybe, but it really wasn't my desire when all of this was thrown in my lap back in 2009. I was working in healthcare, which is kind of ironic when you hear what happened to me in a moment. But big career in Fortune 500, working for organizations, and then went over to nonprofit and healthcare and social services, and which the big difference between nonprofit and corporate is budget. Other than that, the work is the same. Sometimes the demands are higher in nonprofit, but ideally, when it happened back in 2009 is what I like to refer to as my year of worst case scenarios. And over a period of a year from May of 2009 to May 2010, I had a heart attack that should have killed me. And then 17 weeks later, during the Great Recession, for those of us that remember that time, lost my job. And I was in an area that was deeply impacted by the recession. So here I am, fresh off a cardiac event. Now I don't have a job. And it took me several months to find a new role, which required a relocation and uprooting my family and all of that. And ended up finding the new place and a new job. So was working out of town and commuting back in the weekends with packing and all of that kind of stuff to get ready to sell our house and move up to where we were. And I was in my new role for about a week and a half and got a phone call from my oldest daughter, who was 10 at the time. And she's crying. I couldn't understand a thing she said. And finally, I was able to get from her that the bank had come and repossessed our family vehicle. Because when you lose your job, and you don't have any insurance, drug coverage or medical insurance or things like that, you have to make some choices on what you can pay. And entrepreneurs, this is a daily, and for most people, it's a daily thing. Okay, what's my budget? What do I have to be able to afford things? And for me, was obviously food for my family. Three small kids, and also the medication that I was now on, which was costing me $1,000 a month out of pocket. So, needless to say, some things had to take a back seat, and we worked with our creditors. The mortgage company and the auto loan company, the bank, which ironically there's a that branch is across the street from where I live now, and no ill will. Don't blame them. Was never mad at them. When you have an agreement, say they're going to give me some money to go buy a car. My agreement is I will pay you back, and if I don't pay you back, well, guess what? They can take the car, and they exercise that right. I was never mad at them. They just exercised the contract as the terms were there. But so to rewind, heart attack, job loss, car repossession. Finally found a place to rent for the family, moved the family up, unpacking everything, and then realized that we left the bunk bed ladder at our old house, which we were getting ready to put on the market in about a week and a half. So that following weekend, I went back to town to grab the ladder and anything else we happened to leave behind. And when I get to the house, there was the biggest padlock I've ever seen in my life
Oh
on the
no.
door and a sticker on the door that said foreclosure. So, which was really interesting because I never got anything in the mail saying that they were like, "Hey, you know," they just ran out of patience. And again, not upset with the bank, same situation. You know, Hey, you give me money, I buy a house. I pay you back. I don't pay you back, you get house. And that's basically what happened. So in a year's time, heart attack that should have killed me, job loss during the Great Recession, car repossessed, home foreclosed. And all those things happened to me because I was burned out. I was making mistakes at work. I wasn't resting. I wasn't eating well. My relationships were falling apart. You name it. I was living life burning the candle at three ends. And unfortunately, we see a lot of entrepreneurs do that because when you are employee number 1 to 100, there's a lot of things you have to do in order to run a company. And even though this healthcare organization I was running was not my company, I treated it as if it was, and didn't manage my time, didn't manage anything. And thankfully, I was given a second chance because the cardiologist that put the stents in my left anterior descending artery, and if anybody's familiar with that artery, it has a nickname in the cardiology world. It's called the Widowmaker because when you have a blockage in that artery and you have a cardiac event, you're usually viewed instead of seen. And thankfully, I'm still here. But I took that opportunity to go, okay, I don't want to do that again,
Mhm.
which was one of two choices. I could have chose, look at me. I survived all of those things. Um, I'm like Superman. I'm invincible, which I'm a Batman fan, so I usually never say I'm Superman. But I'm like, I could have gone down there. I'm bulletproof. No, no, I wasn't. I realized right away. It's like, okay, the way that I was living was not the way I should be living. So I took the long journey over a couple years to really dig in and figure out, okay, why was that important to me? And what's important and this is something I tell people to do all the time. Doesn't matter if you're looking for solutions to problems or just understanding. It's like reach back in the archives and find that childlike curiosity that you had when you were little. 'Cause you always ask questions. I know everybody does because we don't know. We weren't given a manual when we showed up. We're always asking, "What's this? What's this? How do I do this? What's this?" And that's how I approached the review of how things happen. I'm like, "Okay, what was I thinking behind this?" But I did it with a childlike curiosity. I didn't beat myself up. I mean, I was beaten up enough. So I thought, okay, let's approach that. So I came to grips with what was important. I thought, okay, I need to do things differently, and I did, and found a new role. It was in healthcare. My parents wanted to have me committed. They're like, "Are you nuts?
Mhm.
You're going back to the field that nearly killed you." I said, "Yep, I am, and I'm going to do it differently, and I'm going to do it better." And I was in the sector for almost 6 more years, and thrived. Was on boards of directors, planning committees, funding committees, you name it. I was doing all kinds of different things, and I wasn't burning out
Hmm.
because I knew what caused my burnout, and I made sure that I had the boundaries necessary to be able to do a lot in less time and be really efficient with how I spent my time. And having going through all of that, I was looking at my peers in the sector, and this was like 2014, early 2015, and I'm looking at them. I'm going, "Ooh, I know that look. That was me." Like, so I would say, "Hey, you're gonna want to check yourself because you don't want to go through." And I didn't share what had happened to me. A lot of people didn't know, but yes, you're gonna want to take care of yourself because this could go bad quickly. Healthcare. You know what could happen under prolonged stress. Like, we're just gonna work through it. I'm like, okay, well, I got to do something about this. So I thought part of the journey of recovering and healing from traumatic experiences sometimes is just writing about it. So I started writing things out and was talking with some mentors and peers of mine, and they said, why don't you do some talks about this, write some articles, do some things. And it kind of started off that way. And then from there, turned into a podcast show, turned into, creating a company. It turned into trademarking breakfast leadership. That's trademarked. I got that from the US Patent Office on my birthday a couple years ago that I was able to trademark breakfast leadership. It was such an awesome birthday
Nice.
gift. It's like, this is cool.
Yeah.
I can't go to dinner with this, but it's cool. But from there, it just kind of took a life of its own. And, fast forward to now, I get to do some amazing things and work with some great people because I want people and organizations to be their best, because when people and organizations are thriving, the products and services they make are better, which you and I benefit from. So that's my ulterior motive, is I want people to be their best so I can get good stuff and everybody else can too. So that's kind of a long-winded whirlwind of the backdrop and kind of brought you to what's going on today.
Yeah, well, I'm super curious. That's an incredible story. First of all, you're almost basically on your deathbed. You survive it. It's your life bed now, but then you have a whole waterfall of just unfortunate events. Like, I feel like that could have easily buried you again, or actually buried you, right? So I'm really curious. What was it? After all these bad things happened, and you recognized that I'm burnt out. I'm doing this wrong. You said you started writing, but what led to that mindset shift? Was it kind of one of those moments where you're like, this is ground zero. I've got two choices. It's either continue what I was doing and clearly I'm not going to last very long, or option B, which is fix it, go do something.
Well, I'll thank Thomas Nelson Publishing. Michael Hyatt, leadership guru, used to be the CEO there before he branched out on his own. During my recovery period, because I was off of work for about 17 weeks before the organization decided to go in a different direction. So it wasn't working. So going, just to complete grind, from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m., 7 days a week, to you're not going to work for 4 months. And it was like, okay, now what do I do? So thankfully, at the time, Thomas Nelson, they may still do, I don't know, but they had a book club. So they would mail you books, you read them, you write a review, and you post it online. So I was starting to read some books, and I used to love to read. I used to read a ton before college, and then college, you read textbooks, and then like I don't want to read anymore.
Yeah.
This is killing me with this stuff. So I returned to an old hobby and was enjoying it, and it was reading different kind of books, and it was giving me some different perspectives, which really helped me kind of come to grips with things. So it was kind of like having a paperback therapist in a way, where it was just and I was selectively choosing books that would be inspirational, to motivate, to pull the best out of yourself. And I was looking for that. And that was always something that I believed in, but I really wasn't living it. And I thought, okay, let's get some different perspectives so I can start living this way. So doing that helped a lot, and helped me, quite frankly, navigate the job loss, the car, and the home. Because when all of those things happened, yes, uncomfortable. I was upset, of course, for a moment, but I'm like, it's done. I can't change the fact that I don't have this job anymore. What do I need to do? I need to find a new job. So I went on that journey and eventually found a job. Same thing with the vehicle. They took the bank, or they took the vehicle. Thankfully, we had one that was paid off, so we didn't lose that one. That was good. Okay, house gets foreclosed. Well, call the realtor, tell him, well, you might still be selling this house, but you're going to be working with this bank instead of me because they own it now. So it saved a lot of the open house nonsense and things that we didn't have to deal with. So there was a positive for that, I guess. But going through all of those experiences, I realized, okay, I am going to take the opportunity, and this is something that I chose to do. And I always mention this to people. 99% of people that burn out do not need to reinvent themselves. They don't. They have to make a couple adjustments here and there in their life. It's all you'll need. For my situation, I decided to take the junk drawer, empty it completely, put the drawer back in, and be very, very particular on what went back in there. And that's what I did. And it was necessary for me. But like I said, the majority of people don't have to do that. By doing that, I could really get a little bit more, I guess, intentional with how I was spending my time, what I was doing, what was important, what's the end goal, is this beneficial, or is it a distraction from other things? And that's an ongoing thing. It's not a
Hmm.
set it and forget it. It's ongoing. You can't. Today is different than yesterday. Yesterday was different than the day before. There's a framework that I follow, but I also give myself the flexibility, understanding that there may be some external things that come up that need addressing, and I need to address that. Real life example: I live in a condo building. Condo is about 14 years old. And with, unfortunately, sometimes with condo buildings and high rises and whatnot, the contractors that build these buildings do not use top notch equipment or things.
Shocking, isn't
So I know it's
it?
especially if it's a company that ended up going bankrupt or something.
Yeah, who'd have saw that
90 per,
coming?
yeah, 75%. Next, someone comes in, buys it 10 cents on the dollar, and like, we got to get this thing built. So they basically dig up 50-year-old drywall stuff and they patch the thing up, and wow, the window leaks. Who would have guessed that?
Yeah.
Thankfully, knock on wood, we don't have a window leak here. But my my closet, the shelving racks and things like that came away from the drywall screws. So basically, the clothes and all that stuff kind of went up against the door. So you open up the door, it's like, why is this door sticking? Next thing you know, you see all of your clothes, my wife's and I's clothes, kind
Avalanche.
of coming at me, going, "Okay, well, let's not break the doors. Let's use, okay, I could use a third hand here, but we were able to at least get the stuff and then unload all the clothes." So past couple days is like, all right, well, I wasn't planning on getting a new closet system, but we're going to now. And so that took time. Thankfully was able to find something that worked and was a lot more stable than that. Because clothes can be heavy, I get it, especially depending on what you have. If you got bulkier clothes or suits or whatever, those weigh more than a t-shirt. So it's like, "Okay, let's get something that can hold some weight." I got that. So finished that up yesterday, actually. So that was one of those, okay, well, I can either have all of our clothes piled up, you know, but I'm like, I have OCD. That's going to drive me absolutely bonkers. So we need to do something. We need to do something now. So got it up and all that. So, those were a couple days that were obviously a big distraction compared to what I had planned on doing. But thankfully, in my managing my time, was able to address accordingly and do everything I need to do. So long story short, things happen in life. We have great plans. We're going to do this, and then something comes up, and the key of it is like, okay, what can I do about this? Stressing about it's not going to fix it or change it. So you just accept, okay, this is the reality. What do I have control over? And that might just be your emotions of the situation, and everything else is just completely out of your hands. Like, okay, but and again, that takes effort. That's not something that they teach you in school, and depending on your upbringing, may not be a skill set that your parents had. Nothing against your parents. I can think back to both my parents and how they handled things, and of course that kind of flows on through sometimes. So you get a little bit more aware as time goes on if you pay attention. And I think that's the big thing too, is you kind of have to understand how you tick and how you operate. And I find, unfortunately, a lot of people don't really know.
hmm Well, I like the point you made about you don't have to completely reinvent your life, because there's been low points in my life where I'm like, what I'm doing isn't working. I gotta completely revamp myself, and then that just causes more, just weight on yourself that is probably going to end up holding you back, because really you probably don't need to completely reinvent yourself, because that's overwhelming. That's a lot. But for you, it sounded like you went back to work at the place or in the industry that almost killed you, and you said your family thought you were crazy. But in my mind, I was thinking, oh, that had to have been pretty smart, because you were probably talented at what you did. You knew the industry. That's where your skills and your knowledge lied. But that doesn't mean that the industry almost killed you. It was your actions and the way you were handling yourself that almost killed you. And you had the wherewithal to recognize that and not sit back and be like, oh, I need a completely new industry. I need to learn completely new things, where that could have set you back multiple years, because you kind of have your lane. Why not just go attack your lane at a different angle and maybe do things, whether it's behaviorally or mentally, a little bit different, so that you don't get burned out? Was that an obvious move for you, or where you were like, I can't reinvent myself, I just need to make this a little more simple? Or did you have an internal battle with that?
it was one of those things where I did, when especially when my parents were saying, "Do you sure you want to do this?" And I said, "Yeah," because at that point I had done enough work because I had enough time off to know, okay, I'm going to approach things this way. I'm going to lay down the guidelines of when I'm available, when I'm not, and 24/7 I am not. And thankfully, the person that I worked for at that organization was a strong advocate for when you work here, you're working here, but your nights and your weekends, unless something is going sideways, do not work. Yes, you have a cell phone, yeah, but don't send messages. Don't do that. So it was one of the very fortunate that I found an employer and a boss that mimicked that. And more often than not, the bosses that I've had in my life, other than the one at the organization that I had my 369 days of worst case scenarios, I have been very fortunate to have bosses that were understanding of that because they didn't want to work those hours. If you find that your boss is a workaholic, or maybe as an entrepreneur, maybe you are. Um, it's some, I'm not an advocate for it. I understand there may be seasons for it. My original career was in public accounting, so tax season,
Hmm.
which we are approaching
Yeah.
now. Sorry, folks. It's not only the people that you get to pay the taxes, but all the professionals that for the next 3 or 4 months you will despise life. But you know what? If you live in a cold climate, it's a great way for winter to go by quick
Yeah.
because you're never outside. You're always in the office.
That's
So
right.
it's a there's take the positives. So April 16th or whenever the last day of tax season is, you go outside, you hear the birds chirping, the flowers are blooming. It's euphoric. It's a wonderful feeling. The stress in the shoulders goes away.
Yeah.
I still, and I've been out of that industry for decades, but I still, that day, for some reason, it's muscle memory. I go, "Oh, why do I feel so light
It
today?" Like,
must be April 16th. I feel great.
oh yeah, tax season is over. Yes, awesome. Okay, now I know why. Yeah, so, but it's understanding, where again who you are and what motivates you, and getting a grasp of what you need to do. And too often I see this with entrepreneurs where they will have everything up in here, which is good. It's a good filing system per se, but they don't put it down on paper or at least map it out or have somebody else map it out, have somebody look at it. I love AI or hate AI. I don't. I'm one to leverage it as much as I can, just for ideas and also different ways to look things. Like it's like, here's all the things on my plate. And I did this the other day. I said, okay, here's all the things on my plate for January. How would you, and I tell the AI, you are a seasoned management consultant that specializes in time management projects, things like that. Here's all the things I need to do. Prioritize them on based on getting these types of results, this type of ROI, whatever, and give me back a work plan for the next 30 days. Did it in like 15 seconds, and flushed that, and I'm looking at it, and I go, that actually makes sense that it does that way. It's like, no, that's out of sorts. But it's not to replace anything, but it's to give me a different perspective. Do the same thing asking a mentor or a colleague, what do you think about this? Should I focus on this for Q1 or this? And again, it's going back to asking questions and being curious. But unfortunately, many entrepreneurs, especially in the early stages, the first year or two of their business, the only questions they're asking is, okay, where can I find this? What do I need to do with this? Are these funnels going to work? How am I going to get new clients? How am I going to do all these things start coming in, and you start feeling overwhelmed easily. So it's one of those things where sometimes you just need to take a step back, put everything out there, all the good, the bad, the ugly, and go, okay, what is going to get me to the point that I want to get to in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever target you're looking at, of all these things, what are the couple of things that will help me get closer to that target? And probably should focus on them, because you can't do 10 things at once. Just can't. Well, maybe you can, it's not going to be any good. But and again, I see this all the time. Entrepreneurs try to do everything, and like, you're not going to get anything done. You got to pick one, and don't be. And if you're missing out, and FOMO is horrible. If I pick this, what happens if this is what goes off? It's like, then it does. Okay, you adjust. But what do you want to work on? What resonates with you? And this is an exercise I do with people all the time, and they're having difficulty, picking between two things. I'll say, okay, if I take this one away and say you're not allowed to work on it for the next 2 years, you can't look at it, you can't touch it, you can't Google it, you can't ask ChatGPT about it. How do you feel about that? Meh. Okay, what about this one? Oh, that's bothering me. Okay, that's what you need to work on, because that's where your passion is. That's where your energy is gearing you towards. You can put the other thing aside and focus on that. Get it good. Get something. Good enough launch is something that Dr. Frank Martino used to say in meetings all the
Hmm.
time. It's good enough launch. And then there's his colleagues, other doctors are like, no, it has to be perfect. And you're like, why do you think we call it medical practice? It doesn't say medical perfect. It's practice. That's all
Yeah.
we're doing. It's like yeah. Some are practicing more than others, but I'm not mentioning any names now
Yeah.
or ever.
Yeah. Well, and that's the what is it? The old line, perfect is the enemy of good, right?
Hmm.
Like good enough is what will prevent you from getting stuck and from blocking your own mind of like, I can't do this, I can't launch this, I can't start this XYZ because it's not perfect. Well, newsflash, it's never going to be perfect, right? Perfect's impossible. So why don't you get it as good as you can possibly get it, or good enough, and just launch it. Just get it out there.
Get it out, launch it. Some of us are old enough to remember Windows 1.0 and Windows 3.1 and 3.11 for work groups. Now they're at Windows 11. They've had multiple versions of that operating system. Guess what? They're going to update it again at some point. Why? Because it needs improvement. They want to add features to it. Waiting to have everything perfect, you will never launch. And it was a talk. I forget who the keynote guy was, but one of the things he hammered home is like, if you are issuing or creating a product or service, as quickly as you can, put out crap 1.0, then put out crap 2.0, then 2.5, 0.3, whatever. Get it out there. Yeah, is it going to look horrible? Of course. But you get out there and you learn from people, get the feedback, and go, okay. And then you get better at it to the point when you do release something new, it's like, oh, it's pretty fine tuned. And yes, there's always going to be things to tweak. Come on, we're, like, as you said, none of us are perfect. There's no perfect system or product or service, but get it out there because the people need it. And the sooner you do that, and put the time and effort into it, to don't just put something out there to put something out there, but you know aim high and then adjust accordingly.
What are the initial signs or symptoms of somebody, whether you're an entrepreneur or you work at a company as a W-2, whatever you do, when you're approaching burnout? What was it like for you? What were those kind of well, for you, it sounded like it was a heart attack, but what are the signs and symptoms of things that you can notice where you're like, maybe I need to start taking a step back before we get so far into it where I might be having a heart attack or, God forbid, something like that?
Exactly. Yeah. You don't want to have to be taking Crestor and Coversil and all kinds of other medications if you can avoid them.
Hmm.
But the signs that I see time and time again, and I had all of these. I checked all the boxes on this, and didn't ever, people around me knew it and knew that I was burned out. And several months after my cardiac event, they said, "Yeah, you were really burned out." I said, "Yeah, that's what I'm recognizing. Why didn't you tell me?" And they said, "We did. You
Oh.
wouldn't listen." So, what happens is when you're burned out or approaching burnout, the signs I see time and time again is one, the fatigue. Your body is just completely worn out. You're not sleeping well. Your digestive system, of course, isn't working well because you're not sleeping well. And in many cases, and I see this a lot with people that are working a lot of hours, you're not making the best nutrition choices. So when you're eating foods that are not good for you, your body's going to fight that because it's not natural for the body. The body has to break down all these additional elements. It's like we use the junk drawer analogy. It's like, okay, you want to sort this stuff, so you dump the entire drawer. And yes, there's things you want, but then there's all this extra stuff that you don't really know what to do with. Well, that's the same thing with our bodies. There's certain foods that we have intolerances to. Some of us may have food allergies. And just a side note, a few years ago, I had a food intolerance test done. They tested me on over 260 foods. So, and it gave me a beautiful color coded report, and it had a page of greens like, yeah, your body naturally breaks these foods down, no problem, you can eat this stuff, no issues. Yellow, it depends. You might have some issues. Inflammation is usually the side effect for some things. And then there was a page of red. It's like, sirens going off, and different degrees and scores, of course, but they're like, avoid this red page because you're going to have some issues if you eat that. And by issues, for me, tends to be inflammation and other things we won't go into, but inflammation seems to be the biggest thing. And one of the things about inflammation, especially if you're somebody that suffers with sinus pain or sinus pressure or congestion, where you think you're congested, you think your head is full of stuff, in many cases, if you have inflammation, your head's not full of mucus. It's just your passages are swollen a bit because your body's inflamed because you're eating or consuming things that your body has an intolerance to. So that was a big thing for me because for years I always thought, got all this, gunk in my head, and
Hmm.
try to, get rid of it. Nothing's coming out. I still have it. No, there's nothing in there. Just my nasal passages were inflamed, so the breathing was constricted, which caused problems. So, a little side note on that: it's something that I never recommended, but I suggest if you're curious, you might be eating some foods all the time that are truly not good for you
Hmm.
because you have all this inflammation, and all that inflammation causes sleep problems and pain and all of that. So those are, sleep, your food intake is one thing. A big thing for me, which was a humongous red flag, and I completely blew past and ignored it, was you stop doing things in life you enjoy doing. Because, like, well, I'm too busy, I'm working. But I had the opportunity to do the things that I enjoy doing. I just didn't because I was too wiped out, fatigued, tired to do it. At the time, I was in the Detroit area, and I was a season ticket holder for the Detroit Tigers. Now, this was back in '06, '07, '08. And '06, they went to the World Series and then kept throwing to third base and getting errors, and St. Louis beat them. Um, they should have won that series, but they just completely forgot how to play baseball.
Yeah.
So they lost that series. St. Louis capitalized. Well, kudos to Tony La Russa and the team. They did a good job. But so I went to was able to go to the World Series and view all of that. That was really cool. And then '07 was when I started in the healthcare thing, and by 2008, kind of like scaling back. I'm not gonna go tonight. And before that, it was like, clear the decks. I'm going, and would get there way too early, and would hang out, at the pub across the street. And by the time the rest of the crew that were all grouped together in tickets, they'd come in. Well, needless to say, I was well ahead of them on certain activities, so it was an absolute blast. I don't drink anymore, so it's like I did that today. I'd be like, guess I could read a book,
Yeah.
but so I stopped going, and I love baseball. It's been my original career in accounting was because of buying baseball cards and figuring out the stats on the back of the cards. I love doing that. So for me to quit going to something that I absolutely adored should have been like a, Mike, what in the heck's wrong with you? So if you stop doing things in life you enjoy doing because you're too busy working, you got to look at how you're spending your time, because life is meant to be tasted and enjoyed. And if you start cutting out things you like, That's a big warning sign. And then another big one you see a lot is people making mistakes at work. You're forgetful, more so than we normally are on a daily day basis. But uh, yeah, for me, it was just, making mistakes all the time. And then, of course, the relationship thing, your relationship with everybody. You are miserable in many cases. Maybe you are normally happy go lucky and now you're a curmudgeon. If you're normally a grumpy person, it's amplified. And everybody knows it and they don't want to be around you and you're short fused and irritated and all of that. So, if those signs or any of those are resonating with you, there's a chance that you might be dealing with some prolonged stress, and prolonged stress is what turns into burnout. So you need to address it because um, you don't want to be laying on a table getting a heart procedure done when you're in your early 40s. That's not cool because you got a long life ahead of you, and you don't want to have it be a situation where you could be debilitated or worse because you weren't taking care of yourself. So that's kind of those are the signs you tend to see time and time again.
Absolutely. So you mentioned leveraging your time is a way to avoid stress and ultimately avoid that burnout. So when you were making these changes, or maybe even more so when you were opening your own business, you'd been in corporate, you'd been in nonprofit, but then you started your own business, talking about, writing about, and helping people with this type of thing. What was it about leveraging your time that allowed you to prevent the stress?
For me, it was a couple things. One, and this is something I discovered accidentally or maybe by osmosis. I don't remember reading about this, but it was understanding your energy levels throughout the day. So you have to, like people say, okay, have a food journal. So write down, and there's apps for this. Okay, I had this. How many calories? Ooh, okay, it looks like I'm gonna be a little bit. I'm gonna be on the treadmill a little longer tonight. Oh, it's like, oh, I'm gonna have to ride two treadmills to work this one off. This is not gonna happen. It's like, don't try to ride two treadmills at once, please. Please do not do that, because otherwise you're going to be in the hospital for other reasons, and then you're
Hmm.
not going to be able to work. It's funny how that all happens. But I started documenting my energy. Okay, and this kind of goes in with the food intake as well, where if you eat some foods and all of a sudden you're lethargic afterwards, and there's certain foods that do that naturally. You're like, okay, well, I'm not going to tackle that spreadsheet analysis this afternoon because the numbers are dancing on the sheet and I'm about ready to pass out. So, you basically, for me, and even if you're working for somebody, but if you're an entrepreneur, you definitely can control this, is match the work with your energy levels. But first, you have to understand where your energy levels are throughout the day and what you're able to fly through and what is kind of a drag. And sometimes it can be just the time of day you're doing it, or it could be you hate spreadsheets. You want to go back in time and punch the person in the face that created the spreadsheet. Like, go away. It's like, oh, that goes back hundreds of years, by the way. So, good luck. But what you need to do is just kind of figure out where your energy levels are and align your work days to align with those different projects. And if you can, batch them together. And the reason why I say that is we use different parts of our brain for things. And if you're using this quadrant of your brain to do this kind of work, look at the other things you get to do during the day or the week and see if you can pair them up. Because in that way, you're at that coffee shop in the corner of your brain for a longer period of time and you're working on some things. And if it aligns with your energy and that side of your brain, there's a very distinct possibility you're going to get it done quicker and more accurately than if you were in this other region and it's dragging and all of that. The idea is to maximize your energy, align it with what you're working on so that energy matches up with the work you need to do. And again, this is a self-discovery thing, and some people are not really good at that. But write down your energy level throughout the day. Okay, it's 10:45 a.m. Okay, how am I feeling? And just jot some things down. You can put on a post-it note if you want, or log in a spreadsheet, or I'm sure there's apps that say energy level. Where am I at? And when you do that, you can look back at the report and say, okay, it looks like I have more energy between 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. That seems to be a sweet spot for me. Okay, what can I do during that's when you do things that match up with that energy. Maybe in the mornings, you don't have that energy for that, but those can be for conversations or other things, depending on what you need to do. But what happens with entrepreneurs is we do all of these things that don't use the same side of the brain, and we're going back and forth, back and forth. It's like, watching a tennis match. And at the end, you're like, okay, what did I accomplish today? You don't know because you just completely drained yourself because you've been, haphazardly going to work and now with no plan. Like, yeah, I got to do all these things. So you start doing little here, little here, little here, little there. If I would have done that with the closet build from the last couple days, it would take me 3 weeks to get that thing done. I'm like, no, I want these clothes off of the bed and I don't want them on the floor. What do I need to motivate myself? I want to sleep in my bed. That's all the motivation I needed.
Yeah.
And I went to it, and of course, you put something together and you go, okay, that shelf on that thing there is pointing in a different direction than the others, and it's square. My OCD is going to be bothered by that, but I'm going to tell my OCD to shut up right now. I'm just going to get this done. I'll fix it at some point, or I'll put a cover over it, and I'll never see it again. I don't
Mhm.
know. We'll cross that bridge one day. But again, align your tasks with your energy levels. That was a game changer for me. And also too, this goes back to the taking care of yourself and doing things that you enjoy doing in life. This is where color coding your calendar. Now, if you're colorblind, and I've worked with a lot of people, ironically, that are colorblind, use your favorite symbol instead, because I can't say, well, color that one red, well, or whatever colors they have difficulty with. That's pretty cruel to ask them to do that. They can't see it, so
Mhm.
it's like use a diamond or a star or a square box or a dollar sign, whatever your symbols are. So what you do, and a good colleague of mine in Virginia taught me this at a workshop years ago, is your self care time or your me time or your fun time or whatever you want to call it. The stuff you're doing in life that's good for you, that you enjoy doing, could be going to movies, golfing, watching Netflix or all the other streaming channel, whatever. Schedule it. I know it's silly, like I'm gonna watch the national championship game last night. Yeah, okay, that's good. Why are you putting it on your calendar? Because you're documenting your life. It's kind of a journal in a way, but you're doing it on a calendar. And what her tip was to color code all of your self-care, me time, personal time, fun time, your favorite color. And if you're colorblind, use your favorite symbol. The reason why is our brain is naturally attracted to whatever our favorite color or favorite symbol is. We could pick it out. You could look at things and there could be 500 things in your vision. You're going to recognize a symbol or a color. You're going to focus on that almost immediately. So you do that with your calendar. And what I do is I'll look at my calendar, and of course there's text and colors and all that kind of stuff. And all I need to do is just squint. So I can't read the text, but I can still see the colors. And if you're not seeing enough of your favorite color, that means that that particular day or that particular week, you don't have enough, and enough varies for people, of that me time.
Mm.
So adjust accordingly. This is an ongoing exercise. This is not a set it and forget it. I can look back at my calendar last week and I can see it was a little intense, and that was understandable. And I knew it was going to be that way because I more or less shut down over the holidays. I'm like, I'm not booking a lot of stuff, not going to do a lot other than, strategic planning and all that kind of good stuff. But I'm not going to do the normal things that I get to do a week to week. So that first full week back was gangbusters. Like, and afterwards, I'm like, why do I do that to myself? But I recognized it. I knew it going in. Could look at it and go, okay, is there anything that I can adjust or move around? Or let's maybe move a couple things on Thursday and let's see how this goes. And got to the end of the week and was like, okay, I can feel that that was a really chaotic week, but I don't feel overwhelmed or wiped out. And it's like, okay, all right. That doesn't mean that I'm gonna load up this week that way,
Hmm.
but it's an ebb and flow, and there's going to be some days that you're going to feel like taking on the world, and you want to get 18 things done. I would suggest don't try to tackle the complete to-do list in one day. Get a couple things done and take a moment to reflect on what worked. What did you do in order to complete that so quickly or efficiently? There might be some lessons there that you can apply to other things you do. And from there, you get more efficient at what you do. So that means you can actually do more in less time. And when you can do that, that makes you really efficient as an entrepreneur and also creates the opportunity for growth and additional revenue. So you can hire some people to help you because you can't do it all for long term. Short term, I get
Hmm.
it. But long term, if you want your company to grow, you can't do it alone. You need help. And hire before you can afford it is a phrase that I've heard many, many times. And painful, yes, but if you can, do it because the extra hands and eyes can really help you work on the things that only you can do.
Yeah, I can tell you from my own business, once I started hiring out, bringing in help to help me actually do the thing, that's when I just noticed that there's so much more time available to actually grow the business. Because it's one thing
Right.
to bring in business and do it and fulfill it and keep everybody happy, and then it's another thing to do that plus trying to continue growing it. And it many times I hit a plateau where I'm like, I'm approaching this plateau, and I think I need more help in terms of fulfillment. And I think that's a great point. Maybe a good one to land the plane here is recognize these points of these inflection points where maybe you could really save yourself a lot of stress and a lot of burnout, possibility of burnout, just by having other people help you. Whether that's through maybe just talking to a friend or a family member, a coworker, somebody, or bringing in people in your business to handle specific jobs within your business that perhaps you shouldn't handle anymore, that can allow you to free up time to handle yourself, manage your time, or grow your business, do whatever you need to do, but at the foremost, avoiding that burnout.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love it. Awesome. Michael, well, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for all this information. I think this is just, whether people have heard it before or not, this is just information that I think we all need to, at least every so often, keep hearing to remind us and kind of, because it's really easy when you're starting a business and you're growing a business, it's so easy to get lost in it and to
Mhm.
just get, throw yourself to the wind. But we all need to remember that it's absolutely necessary to sometimes take a step back, assess where our shortcomings are, and to patch them the right way, and making sure that we avoid that burnout. So I want to make sure that all our listeners can check you out or get a hold of you if they want to reach out to you, maybe work with you in some fashion. What are the best ways to do that?
Best way is just go to breakfastleadership.com. There's a contact page down at the bottom, and you can send a quick message, and we'll get back to you on that. On most of the social media channels, the Instagrams and LinkedIn and X and TikTok. While we have it again, this, it's time. Who knows? Crazy things happen in this world, but
That's right.
but the website, is locally owned and operated, so it shouldn't get shut down, hopefully.
All right.
But yeah, breakfastleadership.com. And then from there, you can find all kinds of different resources, from the podcast to articles to links to interviews that I've done, you name it. There's all kinds of fun stuff on there. So
Awesome.
have fun going down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. And what's the name of your podcast again?
The Breakfast Leadership Show.
There we go. Breakfast Leadership Show. So, guys, make sure you check out Michael's podcast. Check him out on his website. Michael, thank you so much for joining us today. You brought a whole lot of knowledge to our audience, and it was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much for your time today, Brian. Appreciate it.
All right.